We're back with another episode of MacStories Rewind, the show that now is all about the picks and less about the news. We're going to dive right in. Federico's got a game for you this week, and I've got a movie. So, hello, Federico. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday to you as well. I like the revised tagline, a show that's all about the picks and less about the news. I love it. It's almost as if we planned this the whole time, that it was going to end up like this. Almost like that.
Almost as if, but the tagline that just came up in my head right now. So I just made that up on the spot. So
welcome to, I mean, it's better than welcome to MacStories Unwind, a show that's all about the unwind. I mean, it sounds better the way you said it.
All about the unwind. Well, we're not going with your idea. No, not at all.
So I hope that the people have been enjoying the new format. The response has been positive so far. And if you think we're on the right path here, we don't usually ask the people do this, but hey, if you feel like it, maybe leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps driving new listeners to the show and helping people discover Unwind and the rest of the work that we do at MacStories. So if you like it, but only if you like it. If you don't, it's fine. Don't tell us about it. No, I mean, if you don't, honestly, if there's something you don't like, feel free to send us an email. Maybe skip the negative review. But hey, if you want to leave a negative review, it's also fine. I understand. Like that's your decision. I won't judge. I will be sad, but I won't judge. Is that a fair assessment of how we feel about reviews?
I think that's very fair.
Okay.
The reality is I don't look at the reviews very often because I don't want to be sad. And when I do go, I'm usually very pleased anyway because they're mostly good reviews.
Because our people are kind people, are the best people. So
they are. And if you have suggestions on things you think we ought to check out, you know what? Send us those too, because we're always on the lookout for new, movies and music and video games and all that stuff. So if you have recommendations, send them our way too.
That being said, my pick for the week is a game that came out 17 years ago.
Yes.
So very timely, but there's a good reason for that. My pick is The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap.
I can't wait to hear about this from you because I have this game too, and I'm ready to start playing it, I think.
This is one of the most underrated 2D top-down perspective Zelda games. So this game came out toward the end of the Game Boy Advance era. This is a GBA game that came out in 2004. Fun fact, it came out in Europe before North America. That was unprecedented at the time. That
was very rare in those days.
Yeah, in those days, a game would come out in Japan first, and then in America, and then the PAL region at the very end of the release cycle. Often, we would have to wait months for a new game to come out in Europe because of all the localizations that needed to happen. This one came out in Europe before North America, so that was fun. So this is a 2004 game for the Game Boy Advance that was developed by Capcom and Flagship. So Capcom were handling through the Flagship studio, and of course Nintendo overseeing the whole project. But Capcom and Flagship, they were doing these Zelda games at the time. Specifically, this is important to understand sort of the flow and some of the side quests of Minish Cap. Capcom and Flagship had previously worked on the Oracle games. So Zelda Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. They were supposed to be 3 games at the beginning, actually. The long-forgotten third game called Oracle of Secrets never came out. This is another fun fact for you on this episode.
I have never heard of Oracle of Secrets, and I know Oracle of Seasons is not even exactly a popular Zelda game, really.
There was supposed to be a third game, which is referenced by these 3 characters. I want to say Nairu, Faror, and someone else. These 3 female characters in the Zelda games that were supposed to represent the 3 Oracle games. Anyway, that's a long digression. So Capcom and Flagship, they worked on the Game Boy games, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. And those are incredible Zelda games, especially the puzzles in the Ages one. really, really good puzzles. Ages is more puzzle-oriented, and Seasons is more action-oriented. So after those games, for the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color, Capcom and Flagship... So Flagship also worked on the A Link to the Past port from Super Nintendo to Game Boy Advance.
Sure, yeah.
So they worked on that, and after that, they worked on Minish Cap. So Minish Cap is a 2D top-down classic Zelda adventure that builds upon the mechanics introduced in Zelda Four Swords, which is the ability for Link to hop on these platforms and essentially split himself into multiple copies of himself. So like you jump on these platforms, and thanks to the power of the Four Swords, you can split Link into 4 Links displayed on screen at the same time. And there's some pretty fun and awesome puzzles that you can solve only by controlling 4 Link characters at the same time. But Minish Cap builds on top of that with that 4 sword mechanic, but also brings a new gimmick to the Zelda series, which is the talking cap, which gives it's a talking cap named Eslo that looks like a bird that is also a hat.
Okay.
Also somewhat reminiscent of the talking hat from the Harry Potter series somehow. And this magical talking cap gives Link the power to shrink himself to a diminutive size, to become this very, very small human that can interact with the underworld that is invisible to the human eye of the Minish. So the Minish are this mini-sized population of these sort of elf-like creatures that inhabit the world of Hyrule in Minish Cap, and they have their whole like towns and villages and little houses, but they are invisible to humans. But Link, by shrinking himself down to the Minish size, can interact with them. So this is the mechanic of this. This is the gimmick of this Zelda game. And this is not, of course, that sense of duality, right? It's not new to the Zelda series.
Right.
In this game, the duality is there's the human world and the Minish world. So you can be big and you can be small. Again, this builds upon the sense of duality that you have in a lot of Zelda games. Like, for example, in Oracle of Ages, you can travel across different time periods. Same in Ocarina of Time, where you have young Link and adult Link. Or maybe Twilight Princess, where you have the light world and the twilight world, right? That duality is not new to Minish Cap, but this mechanic of big and small is the gimmick for this game. And here's what you should know about this. It's a very fun and colorful game. I would say it's the most beautiful Game Boy Advance game.
That is exactly what has drawn me to this game, I think, is the artwork more than anything else, even before I knew the thing about the Minish.
Yes. So it builds upon the aesthetic of Zelda Wind Waker, which came out a couple of years before. So on the promotional artwork for Minish Cap, you will see the same kind of young cartoon Link that you see in Wind Waker. But of course, it's got those big, beautiful 2D sprites on the Game Boy Advance that look absolutely gorgeous. And so it's a bright, colorful game that is a classic Zelda game in which it's not as complex as A Link to the Past. The map is not as complicated. It's a relatively short game that you can complete in, I want to say, if you know what you're doing, 12 to 15 hours maybe. And it's a classic Zelda game in the sense that you have your set number of dungeons that you need to go through. Each dungeon introduces a new item that you can obtain, and that item grants you specific abilities, like the Pegasus boots, for example. They let you run faster and bump into objects, and you have a little vacuum item that lets you suck up enemies and items. You have a boomerang and the magical boomerang. It's the classic Zelda setup in which you unlock different abilities by way of getting different items. What I like about Minish Cap, though, is the mechanic itself. of being able to see from different perspectives the same place as a big human or as a small Minish. That's the thing about it. Like the same place you can view in two perspectives. Now, you're not free to transform into a Minish at any time you want. There are some set areas in which you can transform. So it's not like at all times you can say, oh, I'm standing in this spot, but I want to see what it looks like as a Minish. No.
Right.
You are constrained by the game as to when and how you can do it. But that said, it still makes for a beautiful visual effect. You see, oh, I guess this pond now looks like a lake because now I'm very small, and as a human, I can walk across this pond, but as a Minish, I need to swim, and so I need to figure out how, because now this is like a giant lake in front of me. So that's very fun to see. And the last thing one of the last things I want to point out is there are some long-running side quests in this game, especially one that involves helping multiple Goron characters tear down a wall in a cave. That's a very long-running side quest that requires you to visit multiple points. I believe it requires like 12 different things that you gotta unlock, as well as the aforementioned side quests with the 3 female characters. That's also a reference to the Oracle games. Lastly, I bring this up on Unwind, and I recommend it because I played this game on my Analog Pocket. So the Analog Pocket is the new portable console by Analog that lets you play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games without an adapter. And this game on the Analog Pocket, John, with the special Analog Pocket rendering mode, it looks incredible. It's so bright on that gorgeous IPS display that the Pocket has. It's the Analog Pocket. If I didn't mention this before on the show, I think I did, but the thing about the Pocket is that it makes old games look the way you remember them with rose-tinted glasses. Like,
yes,
old games, when you pick them up again and you play them on original hardware these days, you look at them, you're like, oh my God, this sucks. This is horrible.
I know. But I have a lot of old hardware, and that's happened to me so much. And I don't think I'll touch that old hardware anymore because of the Analog Pocket, because things, even, just those original Game Boy games just look so crisp and great when you look at them on that screen.
Yeah, with that, the quality of the panel itself and the up-pressing that they are doing with the special rendering mode, it makes these old games sing on that screen. They look incredible. And so I had a great time with playing this game with my original cartridge from 17 years ago, with still my original save on it. Had a fantastic time. Being able to create save states and save points at any time you want is incredibly convenient. If you have an Analog Pocket, and if you can find this game either used for cheap on eBay, or maybe if you still got it in a box somewhere, trust me, play it again, because it absolutely holds up.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game. I have dipped into it very briefly, and I do think it's one of the ones that I'm going to spend the most time with the Analog Pocket next. I got the Analog Pocket. I spent the first few weeks I had it doing nothing more than kind of dipping into game after game and being wowed by what the graphics look like. I mean, everything's so bright and crisp. It's really a pleasure to play games on that thing. All right, Federico, let's do a really quick recap of what happened on MacStories this week. And I think I'm biased. Of course I'm biased. But to me, the biggest news was you were on the App Store, which is kind of neat. There was a feature, an interview with you about shortcuts, particularly shortcuts for Mac, and you shared 7 different shortcuts that are kind of a starter pack of sorts to get people going with shortcuts.
Yes, it was a great opportunity to be able to do this with Apple on the App Store. And go check it out. There's a bunch of shortcuts linked on the App Store that you can download, and a funny picture of me that's yes, kind of awesome to see on the front page of the Mac App Store. So yeah, it was great to be able to do this. I'm really happy.
We also had this week an update to AirBuddy. AirBuddy 2.5 came out. That's the app by Guy Rambo for managing your AirPods, Beats headphones, and other wireless headphones. But not just that. I mean, this app started that way, but it also is for managing things like your Magic Trackpad and your Magic Keyboard, that sort of thing. Even your Magic Mouse, if you're a Magic Mouse person. And you can track the battery life. You can actually transfer those peripherals from one Mac to another. If you're using two Macs at one time, it's very easy to move those peripherals, those input devices from one Mac to another. You can set alerts about when the battery is about to die or when it's fully charged up, and set up connections to all those headphones. And it's what's neat about this version is everything is a lot more reliable and faster under the hood, but there's also shortcuts integration, both keyboard shortcuts for some of the common tasks that you would have in AirBuddy, but also shortcuts for Mac. So you can do things like build in actions for figuring out what the battery life is on your AirPods, or connecting them in transparency mode, for instance, if you have a Zoom call. Lots of really cool stuff there. And then finally, Federico released Wordle 1.1. What did that do, Federico?
In WordleBot 1.1, I added support for sharing your Wordle results as an image instead of a block of individual emoji characters, as a single PNG image. And the benefit of that is that it's more accessible on Twitter, because images, you can associate an alt text that screen reading technologies like VoiceOver will read out loud, instead of saying things like green square, gray square, yellow square, green square, which sounds terrible in VoiceOver. You can, if you want to make tweets with Wordle results more accessible, you can now share an image instead and associate a descriptive text to the image that is gonna perform better for VoiceOver users.
All right, perfect. All right, let me switch on over to my recommendation this week, and it's a movie called The Protégé. Now, this is an action thriller movie that was, I think, originally supposed to come out last April, got delayed until August, and came out. And it went straight to, I don't think this ever appeared in theaters. I think it went straight to rental. And I think if it had, maybe it was out in theaters, but in any event, it's one of those movies that reminds me a lot of things like John Wick. It's kind of a fun, fast-paced movie, and I happened to cross it because it was the dollar rental on the Apple TV. I think it's back up to $6 or something now. But in any event, it stars Michael Keaton. It's also got Maggie Q and Samuel L. Jackson. And the plot line here is that Samuel L. Jackson and Maggie Q, who plays Anna, are assassins. Samuel L. Jackson plays Moody. He was in Vietnam during the Vietnam War and took Anna under his wing because her family had been murdered in Vietnam while he was there on an assignment. She ended up killing all of the people who had murdered her family, and he took her under her wing, took her back to London, and they ended up teaching her all of his assassin skills, and they worked as a team, assassinating criminals around the world. And the movie kind of opens with that backstory, as well as they're on an assignment going after a Romanian mobster, using his son as bait. And very quickly, though, they fall into an assignment where they're looking into information about a particular person from back in Moody's Vietnam days. And Moody is killed at the beginning of the movie. And Anna goes on, what is, I think, a very typical action thriller movie revenge quest, trying to figure out who's behind Moody's murder and what's going on, because obviously they're mixed up in something much bigger than just finding this person from back in the days when he was doing assignments in Vietnam. And it takes her back to Vietnam, where she was born for the very first time. And she's at this point, I think, maybe in her late 20s or 30 years old or so. And she's an assassin and trying to figure out who these people are who are behind this. And I don't want to spoil what happens, but Michael Keaton plays Rembrandt, who is an assassin himself, working for whatever this organization is that has they've gotten mixed up with. and she's battling him as well as all the other people in this organization. And there's a mystery involved and a lot of plot twists towards the end. And now this is not the best action movie I've ever seen by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the kind of movie that I sort of miss from not being at the movie theater in a long time, because it feels like it's been a long stretch since we've had a really nice, just kind of like movie candy where it's a very enjoyable, fast-paced movie that you could either go to or watch on iTunes whenever, it comes up for rental. And I found it just like a great escapism type of movie on a Friday night to watch. So I do recommend it, even though you'll go look at the Rotten Tomatoes and maybe it's like 60 or 70%, something like that. Right. It's not like a 9 or anything like that. And I wouldn't claim that it is, but it's still an awful lot of fun and a great escapist type of entertainment. So check it out. I enjoyed it a lot.
All right.
All right, Federico, we're finished for Friday. We will be back next Friday, of course. You can find the two of us over on MacStories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.